The dining room buzzed with the usual holiday chatter and clinking of glasses, but for me, the noise faded into a sharp, unbearable focus on the words slicing through the air. My cousin, always quick with a barb, smirked as he leaned back in his chair and said loud enough for the whole table to hear, still struggling to pay rent. Guess some people just can't catch a break. A few cousins snickered, and my aunt gave me a pitying glance that felt more like a spotlight on my failures. I sat frozen, cheeks burning with shame, heart pounding as if I'd been punched. I wanted to disappear, to shrink down so small no one would notice me anymore. They all saw the version of me that stumbled through dead-end jobs, the one who'd moved back in with my parents after the startup I poured my savings into tanked. What they didn't know was that beneath this beaten exterior, I'd been fighting. Working late nights, coding in cramped coffee shops, refusing to give up on my idea. And tonight, as their laughter echoed around me, something snapped. I wasn't just some failure to be mocked at family dinners anymore. I was holding a secret, a proof of everything they'd dismissed, tucked away in my pocket. And soon, they'd see exactly what I was really capable of. For as long as I could remember, I was the family's disappointment. While my cousins marched confidently through college, landed steady jobs, and started families, I was chasing a startup idea that seemed like a fantasy to everyone else. At first, they humored me with polite questions, but as months turned into years without a single breakthrough, their patience wore thin. I overheard whispered conversations about me being reckless, irresponsible, a waste of potential. The worst was the way they talked behind my back, assuming I couldn't hear. Why won't he just get a real job? He's always dreaming, but never delivering. Then came the layoff. Just when I thought I might catch a break, I lost my last steady paycheck. Instead of sympathy, I was met with thinly veiled contempt. At family dinners, they'd make jokes about my string of failures, their laughter sharp enough to cut. One uncle, whose opinion felt like a verdict, said, "Maybe if you stopped wasting time on those crazy ideas, you'd have something to show for yourself." Another cousin told me outright that I was a burden, someone who'd never amount to anything. What hurt the most wasn't just the words, but the way I could see the disappointment etched on their faces, the coldness that wasn't there before. They no longer saw me as a relative, but as a cautionary tale. The silent dinners after those remarks, the averted eyes, the whispered gossip, it all piled up. I felt invisible and betrayed, abandoned by the people who were supposed to support me. My dreams were mocked, my struggles dismissed, and the weight of their judgment almost broke me. But deep inside, beneath the shame and pain, a quiet fire was starting to burn. What my family didn't see was the relentless work happening behind closed doors. Every night, after the world went quiet, and the doubts tried to drown me out, I was still grinding. I'd spend hours coding in dimly lit coffee shops, perfecting the app that nobody believed in. I taught myself to pitch, to read investors' reactions, to pivot when the market shifted. The rejection emails piled up, but I never let them define me. Instead, each no sharpened my resolve. I also leaned on a small circle of friends and mentors who believed in my vision when my family didn't. They gave me honest feedback and introduced me to people who could help. Slowly, my idea grew into something real, something investors started to take seriously. Behind the scenes, I was mastering skills nobody expected from me: business strategy, negotiation, and most importantly, patience. The truth was, my biggest strength wasn't just the product I was building, but the grit and resilience I'd developed through years of being underestimated. I had learned to keep my plans close, to move quietly while others laughed. And as the IPO date approached, that silent competence was about to shatter every assumption they'd made about me. What began as a deeply personal fight for respect and recognition was rapidly becoming something much larger, a challenge to a whole toxic culture that had governed my family for years. Their laughter and scorn at the dinner table weren't just about me being broke or failed. they were symptoms of a deeper problem, a legacy of judgment that punished ambition and praised conformity. Every cruel comment was a brick in the wall that kept anyone daring enough to dream trapped beneath their expectations. If I let this moment pass without standing up, I knew the pattern would only repeat, not just for me, but for my younger cousins, my siblings, and even the generations to come. The same harsh voices would tell them they weren't good enough, smart enough, or worthy of their dreams. Their arrogance wasn't just personal, it was systemic, rooted in a refusal to accept change or failure as part of growth. I realized then that my success wouldn't just be about proving them wrong. It would be a statement, a disruption of the cycle of judgment, an invitation to others who had been silenced or sidelined. It was about reclaiming power from those who had underestimated me, showing that patience, intelligence, and grit could topple even the most deeply ingrained arrogance. The stakes had transformed. This wasn't merely a matter of family pride or personal vindication anymore. It was about exposing the toxic dynamics that had held us all back and sparking a quiet revolution in how we saw value, success, and potential within our own bloodline. If I succeeded, it would send a message that no matter how deeply buried, true strength and resilience could, and would, rise. After that crushing family dinner, I knew I couldn't simply storm back with anger or pride. The last thing I wanted was to give them the satisfaction of a dramatic outburst or empty boasting. Instead, I resolved to build my comeback on quiet strength and undeniable facts. The plan was clear: work harder, be smarter, and let the results speak louder than any insult ever could. I dove back into my startup with renewed focus. I spent countless late nights revising the product, analyzing market trends, and fine-tuning our business model. Each rejection from investors was a lesson. I learned to anticipate their questions, adapt my pitches, and sharpen my vision. I wasn't just building a company, I was building a fortress of credibility. Beyond just the business, I also took control of my finances meticulously. I tracked every dollar, ensured every legal and financial document was in perfect order, and studied the IPO process with the kind of detail most people reserve for boardroom veterans. I connected with seasoned advisors, mentors, and financial experts who could help me navigate the complex path ahead. At the same time, I began mentally preparing for the moment of revelation. I knew that timing would be everything. Revealing my success too soon could backfire, too late, and the opportunity to reclaim my dignity might slip away. I gathered all my documentation, the official IPO certificate, recent stock valuations, letters from investors, and financial statements. I also recruited a close friend, a trusted financial advisor, to stand by my side that night, ready to answer questions, debunk doubts, and lend credibility to my claims. My approach was measured and calculated. I wasn't going to let pride cloud my strategy. Instead of confrontation, I would offer clarity. Instead of anger, I would show calm confidence. I wanted to dismantle their assumptions piece by piece, replacing arrogance with undeniable truth. This was not about revenge, it was about justice, about reclaiming my narrative through patience, intelligence, and strategic thinking. I reminded myself daily that this comeback was a marathon, not a sprint. The strength wasn't in making noise, but in holding steady until the right moment. And when that moment came, it would be impossible to ignore. The night of the next family dinner arrived with a tension thicker than ever before. I could feel it the moment I stepped through the door, the subtle shifts in posture, the exchanged glances, the barely concealed smirks that once so confidently mocked me. They assumed I was the same struggling dreamer they had belittled for years, the punchline of their jokes. But tonight, I carried with me something that would challenge every one of those assumptions. The evening started as expected, with thinly veiled jabs and sarcastic remarks tossed my way like daggers. Still chasing that pipe dream, one cousin sneered. "How's the rent coming along?" another asked, eyes glittering with anticipation of my failure. I remained calm, my fingers lightly tracing the edge of the folder tucked into my bag. When the main course was cleared and the room's attention shifted, I seized the moment. Without a word, I placed the folder in the center of the table, catching the room off guard. I thought it was time to share some truths, I said, voice steady but calm. One by one, I unfolded the documents, the official IPO certificate, the recent stock valuations, audited financial statements, each page a silent but powerful testament to what I had accomplished in the shadows. The room fell into a stunned hush. Eyes widened, mouths parted in disbelief. The cousin who had mocked me earlier opened his mouth to scoff but was quickly cut off by my trusted financial advisor friend. With a calm authority, they explained the significance of the IPO, the value of the shares, and the strategic moves behind the company's growth. The advisor's clear, precise answers stripped away any remaining doubt, replacing smug arrogance with stunned silence. It was a confrontation without shouting or tears, a battle of facts versus false assumptions. Every question they dared to ask, I answered with patience and confidence. The laughter that once echoed through the room was replaced by a heavy quiet, the kind that signals a shift in power. The relatives who had once dismissed me as a failure now looked at me with something close to respect, some reluctant, some awestruck. Their veneer of superiority cracked, revealing insecurity and surprise. In that moment, the underdog wasn't just winning, I was rewriting the story of who I was to them, forever. The silence that followed my revelation hung heavy in the room, thick with disbelief and the slow dawning of reality. For years, I had been the family's overlooked failure, the target of sneers and whispered doubts. Now, for the first time, they faced the undeniable truth: I had succeeded on my own terms, against all odds. The impact was immediate and profound. The cousin who had mocked me most loudly looked away, unable to meet my gaze. The aunts and uncles exchanged uneasy glances, their previous certainty shaken. Even the skeptics were forced to acknowledge what the numbers showed: I was no longer the underdog. I was a force they had underestimated at their own peril. But the greatest surprise wasn't just the stunned silence or the grudging respect. It came from a quiet corner of the room, a cousin who had always seemed distant, reserved, and even competitive. After the initial shock, she approached me quietly and admitted she had secretly invested in my company months ago, believing in my vision when no one else did. Her support had been a hidden lifeline, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, allies can appear where you least expect them. That night marked a turning point. The family dynamic shifted as my story rewrote their assumptions and shattered long-held prejudices. More than just a financial victory, it was a triumph of patience, resilience, and quiet competence over arrogance and dismissal. I didn't just prove them wrong, I showed them what it means to fight with integrity, to rise through perseverance, and to claim one's place with dignity. And in doing so, I finally found the justice I had been searching for, not through revenge, but through undeniable success.